West Indian families at this stage could afford are very small. But they still designate a space which is not packed out with people, and where there are distinct rules as to when the whole family goes in there and when they don't.
At that time, it wasn't a lot of people who have that. So there's a lot of people still living in the one room, so it was a bit posh.
It was so special to a West Indian because we used to that small little room. And when you get a different room that you could put things in and entertain people, it was a big achievement for us.
Because you'd been living in this one room for years, and then you get to this house where you have this marvelous spare space, a front room, and you immediately begin to think of all the things you can do in it.
Certainly for my parents, there were moments when I looked, through my sort of child's eye and saw them, just relishing the fact that they'd kind of arrived here and the fact that they'd kind of worked, essentially their fingers to the bone and achieved something. And there they were in their front room, and they're essentially, English people in their castle, essentially.
The first thing I put in was a 3-piece settee. It was gorgeous because when you rent a room, you're lucky if you get 2 chairs. Once I get my 3-piece settee, you couldn't stop me. My living room started looking lovely. And the more I come out and see stuff, I would buy it, and it was gorgeous. It was lovely.
And so the new Black Britons started to acquire desirable items to enhance their new homes. But for some reason, they were all buying the same things.
Growing up, you actually think that it's your front room and nobody has the same front room. But it's only when you go around to your friends' homes and you actually walk in and you think, deja vu, I've been here before.
Back in those days, the West Indian home, virtually every home was almost the same.
You see the cabinet, you see the glass, you see the sideboards, you see everything the same. And you just kind of wonder to yourself, did our parents go shopping together? But then when you go to all your friends and they all have the same story, that's when you think this thing is hereditary.
How does it become so uniform? Well, partly they visit one another and you see what so-and-so has. They've got a bigger, they've got a new parafinito, they've got a new radiogram, etc.
I know that a lot of black women would visit each other's homes, would see something on the mantelpiece, would see something on a drinks cabinet, may comment on it or not, but would go out next week and be trying to find that same object.
But what I think is really riveting is that everybody thinks they are making an individual special space of their own. They think, they have this combination is a bit different from, they don't have one of those, So within this very common pattern, which testifies to our collective social cultural identity, everybody is making an individual imprint on it by just changing the arrangement a little bit.
So what were these things you simply couldn't be without? Here are the top 10 essential items for every West Indian front room. First up, the glass cabinet.
The glass cabinet was like, hey, this is the thing which designates a West Indian front room.
Our glass cabinet was a pretty grand affair, and it was full to the brim of very, very shiny objects, all of which were guarded jealously and none of which we would have dreamed of touching.
Everything was in there that you thought one day when we get older we might just be able to use those plates.
They were as much for show as for use. They were for seeing and looking at rather than drinking out of.
When your friends come along, you want them to see, oh, look at those lovely plates, look at those cups and saucers. Oh, she's earning some loads of money.
To be given something out of the glass cabinet to use, like the tea set or to be allowed to touch one of the ornaments, my God, I mean, you must be God or the pastor.
Next, the ornaments.
Every West Indian front room has got their crystal ornaments. You would leave food and go and buy ornaments. You have your little dog, your little cat, your little baby, because we want to show it off. Oh, this is my front room. Look at the ornaments then.
For some women, it got a bit out of control.
My mum would be very disappointed if you messed up her front room. I mean, you could have thousands of ornaments, and if you moved one, she would notice which one it was. Very deep.
The thing about the ornaments is that they would always get broken. There were just so many of them.
They would just fill the room and they would become like a museum. And you as a visitor, we were scared in case you'd move and you may break something.
There was always this kind of struggle to repair them before one's parents got home.
One particular piece that has haunted me to this day is the Bambi ornament.
The most horrible, disgusting, over-the-top ornament you can ever imagine.
And that Bambi was being dusted every week and it never seemed to break. You'd have other things that break and you'd be in serious trouble. But this Bambi just lived on and on and on.
I have to say that I've always disliked the glass fish. And I'm not sure why. It's actually one of the few ornaments that my mother still has from the 60s.
I remember being old enough and confident enough to recoil in horror when she introduced it to the house.
If you moved it, you'd get in trouble. And sometimes you'd pass it and it would knock and you'd freeze because you know that if that ever fell down and broke onto the glass table, we'd have to leave. We'd have to leave home or we'd be put in care. We would be, as simple as that, and I would accept that.
Number 3, the drinks trolley or corner bar.
The drinks trolley seemed to be very much for show.
And they could get very ornate, gold trimming, chrome, glass.
And there'd be all these miniatures of different spirits.
Baby Sham or Cherry Bee.
And sweet wine sherry, I think.
This was really a male domain, the corner bar, because it was usually the men that drank. And this is also for the guests coming up, the man of the house could show off his corner bar and mix his cocktails or pretend to like he was mixing cocktails.
You forget that people had to entertain in their homes. There weren't places where, for a lot of Caribbean people, would actually feel comfortable going.
Because that kind of public culture of the bar room and the dance hall was not available for the early kind of Caribbean immigrants in Britain, because they were chased out of the bars and out of the bar rooms.
And so, you know, if you're talking about the 50s and 60s, the domestic space was the only space in which people could feel that they could be themselves and enjoy their family and their friends. So I think that sense of revelry and party going, which would have happened in a much more public way in the Caribbean, it had to become something that happened within the domestic space.
Next up, the radiogram.
The radiogram was essential, wasn't it? The radiogram was something, if you didn't have it in your front room, you weren't anybody at all.
Radiogram, brilliant piece of furniture, valve base that had pure sound.
And it occupied